All right. Hello. Everybody, it says we are live. I hope that everybody sees us. I think we're back on YouTube tonight. So hopefully we don't have any archiving issues. But welcome, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, to the final. I mean, this is just something I can't believe, but it happened, and it's a wonderful, wonderful time so far. And I'm here with my co-host, Jay Dyer. Jay, how has your week been so far?
It's been a great week. We've been super, super busy. So we're basically, doing 2 or 3 podcasts or videos a day. And then I'm, constantly, I'm trying to get to 1 live stream a day. So I'm trying to kick it up. So
that's good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I can't imagine doing more than 1 after all the writing it takes for me to get the 7 o'clock underway. But that's awesome. I love listening to other people's schedules.
Yeah, well, your inspiration. I mean, I know you've been doing the nightly live stream for a good while, and I've been thinking I need to work up to that. But we do a bunch of things, so it's kind of like trying to balance it all out. And I'm trying to do another book, and there's just never. It seems like there's always more stuff to do. You never kind of make any progress, but
yes,
we'll get there. I did enjoy reviewing these last few chapters. I forgot how power packed they were with information.
Well, let's just jump into that, because we have chapter 16 until the end, and you're right, it's power packed. My notes, the way that I have written this is that from 16, I see that as the mea culpa chapter, the reverse Scooby-Doo. When you watch a Scooby-Doo mystery, there's always a point there where the kids have figured out what the hell's going on. They unmask the person. The person says, "Oh, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for you meddling kids," and they admit to everything. Well, this is the reverse, where you get so much from Mustafa Mond, but he's not in a place where he's been defeated. He just knows that, I'm the control. I'm in control of everything here, and I can tell you exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it's not going to make any difference. And so that's chapter 16 for me in a nutshell. I have some underlying things here that we can get to, and I want to go and bring the audience in too. But the reverse Scooby-Doo. What was here? Page 218. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about my ears, and sometimes voices. The savage's face lit up with a sudden pleasure. "Have you read it too?" he asked. "I thought nobody knew about that book here in England." So he's starting to feel the hope that floods into the savage whenever he feels like he has somebody to talk to. And it is just one disappointment after another. This one in particular with the controller himself, asking why these things are prohibited. Why they're so beautiful. It's precisely because they're beautiful that they're prohibited. Mm-hmm. So we get all these things clobbered over the head with the control. Go ahead and talk a little bit about what you have seen.
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention that I forgot to mention back in chapter 9 was that the central location of the World Controller's office for, I think, what they call Western Europe. Mustafa Mond is the resident world controller for Western Europe. And back in chapter 9, they had stated the location of his office, which is Whitehall. Of course, Whitehall is the central location in London where the powers that be govern London today. So I think he's, again, sending us a lot of clues about the way the world is run now, even though it's supposed to be, the year 2500 or whatever. Mm-hmm. Because Whitehall is where we find, I'm going from memory here because we went to London and I did a talk there at AV9, and we walked over by Big Ben and then all around the sort of the government Whitehall area. And I think it's not very far from the big MI6 building, all of that sort of within a few minutes walking distance. I think Chatham House, Pratt House, Tavistock, they're all in that area. So he's telling you that Whitehall is where the World Socialist Controller Mustafa Mond's offices are located, because he's telling you that the Fabian Socialist World Order is really run out of the city of London, right, out of Whitehall. So I forgot that little clue there, but now, as we fast forward to this next conversation about first literature and then the Bible, this chapter they talk about the arts. And like you said, John the Savage is really surprised because he's finally found somebody that he can have a conversation with, that he thinks, appreciates good literature. He's going to have a sophisticated, highbrow conversation with Mustafa Aman. And he can't believe that the feelies, which are these horrible, basically Michael Bay directing porn movies, where it's basically just explosions and porn. And he's like, he can't believe that there's not better quality arts like, Shakespeare's Othello. And Mustafa Aman says, well, nobody's going to understand or appreciate Shakespeare's Othello. And John the Savage is sort of, surprised by this. And he says, well, why can't we have good art? Why can't you promote that? And he says, because promotion of good art comes with beauty, freedom, the love of truth, and all manner of things that might upset the existing control mechanism and the existing status quo. So you can't have high art without also having beauty, warfare, nobility, and you can't have any of those things without some notion of pain, suffering, conflict, and all of that has to be done away with. And he says, you understand that the whole purpose of the control mechanism, the whole purpose of Soma, the whole purpose of their culture creation. Notice that the movies, the music, it's all geared towards control. And it's all intentionally not aesthetically pleasing. There is no high art because you can't have high art and control at the same time. The next chapter will say the exact same thing, but with theology, you can't have God and complete control by the scientific dictatorship at the same time. So all of those things kind of begin to dawn, as you said, on John the Savage, as he has this debate with Mustafa Aman. Is one of the best chapters in the book. And that you just get all of these explanations as to not a future far off dystopia's control mechanism, our control mechanism today in this world. And the best part was the conditioning explanations. He says, no, so all of this art, all the fake art, and then they're going to get into fake science here in a minute at the end of this chapter. He says the fake art, the fake science controls everybody and keeps them in their place. And he says that, for example, we tried all these things in the past, like experiments where we had an all alpha society.
The Cyprus experiment.
Exactly. He says we put a bunch of alphas on Cyprus and they just kill each other. It's like, so we'll never do that again. He says that we got to have these different castes because that helps to control and keep order, stability. And he says that ultimately the question is about the exchange between, you can either have a society that's based around the love of truth, beauty, justice, freedom, or you can exchange all that for convenience and ease and happiness. And he says you can't have both.
Right.
So we opted for a scientific dictatorship based around making everybody feel good, feelies, and so forth. And he says that's the final revolution, and that is the revolution that ends all revolutions by creating a completely stable control mechanism, and that requires the stamping out of free will. And by the way, last thing I'll say is that that's precisely what Bertrand Russell talked about, right? I always cite this and people are like, where are you getting this? Where are you getting this? Bertrand Russell says in Impact of Science on Society that you won't be reading Shakespeare. You won't be reading the Bible when the scientific dictatorship comes in. And that's why this book says that, because they were in the same circles. He's telling you why. This is why.
It's and even other things, all the notions of bread and circus are in here too. After the Cyprus experiment is talked about, and they say, and they're happier below the waterline, happier than above it, happier than your friend here, for example. He pointed out, in spite of all that awful work, awful. They don't find it so. On the contrary, they like it. It's light. It's childishly simple. No strain on the mind or the muscles. 7.5 hours of mild, unexhausting labor, and then the Soma ration, and then games and unrestricted copulation and the feelies. What more can they ask for? And it's and you talk about bread and circus before that, right now on the preceding the Cyprus experiment on page 223. He goes into talking about more social controls that bring up ideas of welfare, public education, universal basic income, automation of work. Why it's just all it makes you wonder what's going to happen when all of those people are not needed anymore. completely not needed anymore.
Well, did you notice the pyramid structure?
Is a column.
Oh, the iceberg. He says the optimum population, says Mustafa Aman, is modeled on the iceberg. 8/9 are below the waterline. That is think of an iceberg like a pyramid, and then you have at the top. And he says all the people below are happy. Those that are above it, those that are below are happy than those above that are above. And then there are actually, I'd forgotten about the breakaway civilization island section, because there are actually people that do wake up and figure out what's going on. And if you wake up and figure out what's going on, they give you the option of conforming, or you go to the island where all the cool people are.
I know.
Individuals.
It sounded like, when I remembered that part, I said, that's not half bad. Obviously, Helmholtz said, give me an island that has really poor weather conditions, because I feel under that strain, I'll write better. But that's actually kind of a very humane thing to offer up to people.
Well, I hope there's some island where we can flee to when the technocratic order comes in. I mean, a lot of these dystopian science fiction novels, and even ones that aren't really that dystopian, they have this notion of the breakaway civilization. I did a whole live stream on the history and theory of breakaway civilizations. It's in a lot of science fiction movies too, but Ayn Rand's not Fountainhead, is it Fountainhead? I get them mixed up. Ayn Rand stuff, Fountainhead. You have Galt's Gulch, which is where they all the elite recede to when they let civilization collapse, because civilization is basically caving into total socialism in the Ayn Rand story. And then we got movies like Interstellar. You have a breakaway civilization in Interstellar. So this is a common theme in a lot of science fiction novels. I just forgot that there was this breakaway island where you could go if you were cool. And they ask because it turns out Mustafa Aman used to be a science into true science, and he made too many true discoveries, and then they told him, you can either go to the island and continue your true science and live with the cool people, or you can become a world socialist controller. And he said, I opted for being a controller rather than being a cool guy. He said, but anybody who's anybody is on the island or on the islands.
It makes me wonder. I wish that we got a second book just about what was going on the island, because that sounds like.
He said, I think in the introduction, he said something like, "If I had redone," he said, I should have redone the novel where they had a lot of more options of freedom." He said that would have been better, because he said something like, the novel ends too dark.
Yes, I mean, we're getting to that, but let's get to chapter 17 first, the second to last chapter.
One last thing though before we go to 17.
Yeah.
Did you notice the fake science?
Oh yes,
Science is controlled, and he says, yeah, of course we put out fake science, because Helmholtz says, wait a minute, what do you mean there's fake science? Because you told us, in the hypnopedic repetition mantras, we say science is everything, and he says, yeah, but that's the science that you believe in. He's like, you don't know real science.
Even
says,
science.
We give you a bunch of fake science, and you believe them. That's like, I'm thinking, okay, that's Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's, all the science, Bill Nye, all those people. That's like the normie fake science.
At the top of the page, 225. Even science must sometimes be treated as a possible enemy. Yes, even science. I had set that aside, and it's just it's incredible, because again, what is science? And who
he calls it orthodox and non-orthodox. So that's religious terminology, right? So he said, think about COVID, or the COOF. What did everybody do with Fauci, right? Trust the science. Trust the science.
He personified.
That's religious.
He personified the science. He said, if you deny me, if you deny me, you're denying the science. He was the law. He was science.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't think of any better example of mainline normie scientism versus true science, which is, we can argue what that is and who's discovering that. But he talks about there being a religious scientific orthodox. So scientism is the religion of the society, basically.
Yes.
That and the rave orgies that they have.
The method. Yeah, okay, now in 17 I have the biggest note I have for myself right on top of the chapter heading is that one line that comes up maybe a page or two in, God in the safe, Ford on the shelves. I mean, that was the big takeaway here. The sickness is, I love when they were going through, what was this that they were talking.
Don't forget that Mustafa Mon, they noted, by the way, is above the law. So he's not bound by the laws everybody else is bound by. He can read Shakespeare in the Bible and do whatever he wants, right?
Oh, and
so the World Socialist controllers have immunity. And then another thing that was mentioned at the end of 16 was that mass production, which came from monopoly capitalism, led away from truth and beauty to ease and happiness. So that's another point where monopoly capitalism is what creates the atmosphere and the situation that produces the world socialist order.
Yes, I lost my spot as to where he actually said, because it's not something that's implied. He said, the laws are for people, but I choose not to. I can choose to break the laws if I want. Yeah. And he has a lot of things, a lot of really interesting reading that is all squirreled away in his safe. And this is where we get into, of course, just this debate about God's existence. So here's one question I had for you and everybody in the audience out there. Does Mustafa Mon believe in God? Because it sounds like he does at least lean heavily in thinking that believes there is a creator, there is a God. But as far as dealing with the task at hand, which is managing this world, he has to live under a new set of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he talks like, it's kind of like what he had said a few chapters earlier, that there was he had been reading a paper that made a discovery that there might be purpose or telos or something going on in science. He said which had to be banned because we can't have the people thinking that there's any power authority above the world state. And so he says this basically the same thing when they have this argument about you can't have the people believing in God, but he kind of hints like there might be one. there may be some of these things that I don't believe in. He's like, but we don't want anybody knowing that or thinking about that because that's the old order. That's the old way of doing things. And so he reads this lengthy quote from Cardinal Newman about age. And you remember in this society, they don't have old people.
I love that. That's a wonderful excerpt, by the way, that they included in this book about getting.
That's because they don't want wise people, right? Age brings wisdom, and wisdom brings reflection, contemplation. And like Cardinal Newman says, you're not as bound up with your passions. When you're older, you're able to focus and you're governed more by your reasoning and not by your passions. And that allows you to reflect on the death, the coming of death, and the mortality of man. And that leads people to think about God. And he says we don't want people thinking that. That's why everybody's kept young, kept a slave to their passions. And then by passions, I don't mean in the sense of like being passionate. In the Orthodox theology, slave to the passions just means slave to your vices. So he says God is incompatible with machinery and happiness. So you can either have a transhumanist technocratic society where everyone's happy, or you believe in truth, freedom, free will, aesthetics, beauty, God. They all go together.
Says, so do you think there is no God? No, I think there quite possibly or probably is one. Then why? Mustafa Mon checked, but then he manifests himself in different ways to different men. To pre-modern times, he manifests himself as being that's described in these books. Now, does he manifest himself now? Asked the savage. Well, he manifests himself as an absence, as though he weren't there at all. Well, that's your fault, he says. Call it the fault of civilization. God isn't compatible with machinery and scientific medicine and universal happiness. So that's just, it's incredible for somebody to say, yes, well, God probably is there. There probably is a God. But as far as what I have to do right now, God does not, he doesn't really, he doesn't fit into our construction. And
that's why he says that because if God exists, then humans have a soul and we're made in the image of God. and we have natural innate inclinations. And that's what John the Savage says. Well, don't you think it's natural to believe in the existence of God? Don't we kind of have an innate belief and a tendency towards that? And he says, no, we can't go with that, because that would mean that you're not a perfectly conditioned being. He says the reason people believe in God, I would say, is because of conditioning. And that's because he's expressing the Enlightenment tabula rasa view that man's a blank slate. He has no innate tendencies, beliefs, or anything stamped on his being. He's just a completely conditioned being of, operant conditioning, as the Pavlovians call it. So this is actually a section where he's echoing that Watsonian, Pavlovian idea of operant conditioning, that all is environment, all is stimuli, and there's nothing innate in us, right? Which is literally the attitude of those pioneering lunatics that were the founders of psychology.
It also ties in really nicely to what pops up a couple of pages later with the ideas of nobility and heroism, because there's no great. I mean, there are similar ones that people are noble for many reasons, in the defense of those who are loved ones to us, the innocent in society, men defending women, children, whatever the hell it is. Nobility and heroism is a common element in humanity, and especially nobility and heroism in the name of God and things that we see precious through the divinity of God. And of course, to get into the minutia here of how he gets into what chastity means as far as passion and the controlled society, never having any kind of conflict there, never creating the need for nobility and heroism. And I understand the back and forth there where he's saying that where Mustafa Mond and John the Savage are going at it, and he's saying, well, if there's no war, if there is no crime, if there's no unhappiness, no nothing, there's no need for heroism and all that stuff. So why so why want all of that pain, all that death, all of that trouble, just to be able to have the opportunity to be noble and to be heroic? Which of course brings up an example of just how intricate and chaotic it is to be a human being at times. And toward the end of the novel, you have John just saying, I reserve the right to be unhappy. I want to be dangerous. I want to be, because life doesn't happen in a controlled environment. It really is, what are you getting out of it is based on how you are able to navigate through all these very chaotic conditions that we always find ourselves and always had. And so I really enjoyed that exchange right there about nobility and heroism, because that's the basis of every wonderful fairy tale and children's story we ever heard in our lives. And you needed that dragon that had to be slayed, and they want to get rid of all the dragons.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, freedom is necessary, at least in the fallen world, for the possibility of virtue and choosing virtue. I wouldn't say that the fall was absolutely necessary for the good, because we have, in the Garden of Eden, we have the existence of the good prior to the fall. But the fall definitely makes it possible to have redeeming good and multiple virtues that can be exemplified as a result of something bad. And that's, kind of what we believe is divine providence, that even though bad things happen, they can always be turned to the good. So that's one reason why this is kind of a chapter where we get a sort of a theodicy, or a discussion of theodicy. Theodicy is the problem of evil in relationship to theology, or to God's existence. So that's this book's version, or this chapter is dealing with that question. And John the Savage is coming to the conclusion that, well, we need these things because it's a better world. And Mustafa Mond is just simply saying, no, we don't want that world, because I would rather have a world where we kind of create a false Garden of Eden, where there's no pain, there's no struggle, there's none of that, but it's not based around virtue, it's based around technology. So it's kind of a return to Eden, but it's like a fake synthetic Eden based around mind control, drugs. And that's precisely where we are, right? What the the control mechanism of today's world mainly controls us through all of these things.
Yeah.
Convenience, lack of struggle, ease. Everything's going to be made easy. Oh, you don't have to have a job. We'll give you a base, universal basic income, and you can just lay in your coon pod and play video games and stare into the matrix all day long, and you can eat the bugs. And we're gonna, it's this promise of utopia, but it's going to be a complete dystopia.
And here on that, here it is at 238 at the top. There's always Soma to calm your anger, to reconcile you to your enemies, to make you patient and long-suffering. In the past, you could only accomplish these things by making a great effort and after years of hard moral training. Now you swallow 2 or 3 half-gram tablets, and there you are. Anybody can be virtuous now. You can carry at least half of your mortality about in a bottle. Christianity without tears. That's what Soma is.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah, and that's, by the way, that's also a Crowleyan type of dictum. I keep seeing more and more subtle Crowleyan ideas in the book, which I noticed that I had written Aeon of the Child in 2015, last time I read it, but I didn't realize all the other subtle hints, like Mustafa Mon being a PEDO hinted at, and then we get this, Crowleyan dictum of Christianity without tears. He says something like that, religion without tears, and my assumption would be that Huxley is getting that from Crowley.
Right below that, I thought that there was something really funny and ironic. Right below the Christianity without tears, we have John the Savage says, but the tears are necessary. Don't you remember what Othello said? If after every tempest came such calms, may the winds blow till they have wakened death. There's a story one out of the old Indians used to tell us about a girl.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, it's magic without tears. Go ahead.
Magic without tears.
That's the Crowley phrase.
The young men who wanted to marry her had to do a morning's hoeing in her garden. It seemed easy, but there were flies and mosquitoes, magic ones. Most of the young men simply could not stand the biting and the stinging, but the one that could, he got the girl. Charming. But in civilized countries, said the controller, you have the girls without hoeing. You have girls without hoeing for them. And I thought that was really ironic, since they're all hoes. Yeah. And I said, you don't have to do any hoeing for them.
That's a play on words. Yeah, he's doing a play on words. But funny. Yeah, you used to have to do something to earn the woman, and he's saying, no, now you don't have to do anything. Everybody gets to have sex with everybody. By the way, I had it backwards. It's Crowley wrote Magic Without Tears, which is probably a reference to this. So it was more so the other way around. Crowley probably was pulling that from Brave New World.
Gotcha. I got to jump more into that. I really do. Actually, the next page, we have a little bit of a nod to what the media does today. A little bit of The Purge, Violent Passion, VPS. Let's see here. There's a great deal. Men and women must have their adrenals stimulated. So he's talking about, Mustafa Mon is talking about how they need to have their adrenal glands stimulated from time to time. And it's one of the conditions of perfect health. That's why we made VPS treatments compulsory. That is Violent Passion Surrogate. Regularly, once a month, we flood the whole system with adrenaline. It's the complete physiological equivalent of fear and rage. We get that not only through pharmaceuticals, but everybody is dosed with it through media. I think that's what we're getting that right now. That's the emergency broadcast system.
It is, and it's just like in 1984 when they have the 2 minutes of hate. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
You have 2 minutes where you scream at the bad guy that they've made up, like you scream at Goldstein, the made up fake terrorist.
Hey, the scream at the visor screen.
Yeah.
So they make sure that you're actually doing it too. You can't hide from the visor.
Yeah, you can't not. Exactly.
But, so
you get in trouble if you don't do it.
Yeah, you don't. Now, Bernard went, obviously Helmholtz wanted to somewhere else, but Bernard, he went off to an island too. He had to be done away with. And with John the Savage, who at the end of chapter 17 is just pretty much saying, I claim them all. I want to be unhappy. I have the right to all that. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. And, and he in chapter 18, which is the final run here, he has inhabited an old lighthouse, and that is when that is when this really comes to a fizzling, kind of nightmarish end. This is really a nightmare at the end, and so he sets up this hermitage inside of the lighthouse, and of course he has his seeds. He's planting a garden. He has his solitude. He has his self-flagellation every day.
He's a prepper. He becomes a prepper.
He's a prepper. He's self-flagellating with the ropes and hitting himself, and he wants to sanctify himself, get right with God, and just be away from everybody else. But of course, he is spotted. The media starts swarming around him. They come with the helicopters. They come with the tours. Everybody wants to see the savage doing the crazy farming thing, and away we go. So what do you got with this? What did you pick up?
It's great that he becomes a media spectacle just because he's a normal human, right? The society is so crazy that the normal human becomes this media spectacle, right? Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of I think remember the Duggars? I mean, I think they got in trouble for being kind of weird, but before anybody knew there was like weird sex stuff going on, the Duggar family was weird because they had a bunch of kids, right? That was the main reason they were a media spectacle, which go back 100 years ago, that was normal, right? It was normal to have 10 kids.
Yep. And
John the Savage is a spectacle like them. Yeah.
What do they only have? What do they have? 8? Or
I don't know.
That was Kate plus 8.
Yeah.
Or John and Kate.
Same principle, right?
Yeah.
You're so weird because you have a bunch of kids. When
John and Kate plus 8. I forgot, and they had some kind of a bad.
They did too. Yeah, there was like a lawsuit there as well.
Jeez, gosh. Well, here you go. The Savage has been found. They're starting to come and make a spectacle about him. He's kicking. I love when he starts actually attacking reporters, shooting arrows.
Yeah, he kicks him in the coccyx.
Yeah, and the coccyx, and then he shoots an arrow at a helicopter, and it pierces the helicopter, which I think is really a testament of his craftsmanship of that bow.
Right.
Damn, man. But this is how I feel.
He's like a warrior, right? Like he beat the shit out of the.
Yeah. Yes.
The reporter.
But what was it at the end? That thing that really got me. We had another name drop. We had Darwin Bonaparte.
Yeah, not a great name.
Darwin Bonaparte as the guy who broke the big story. Watched him from afar inside of a bush or something. Just spied on him and then sent it into the news media. But it was called the Savage of Surrey. That had been released and could be seen, heard, and felt in every first-class Feely palace in Western Europe. Feelies. I can't take it anymore.
It's like tabloids, basically, right?
Yeah. But, and this is really gets to me. On page 255, this is where the Savage retreated toward the cover, now in the posture of an animal at bay, stood with his back to the wall of the lighthouse, staring from face to face in speechless horror like man out of his senses. From his stupor, he was aroused to more immediate sense of reality by the impact of his cheek of well-aimed packet of chewing gum, a shock of startling pain, and he was broad awake with fiercely angry. So go away. He starts going after. He starts beating everybody, and they're all just like hurrah, hurrah. They're asking him to whip them. They want to see the whip. Then they all start beating each other up. Because all they know is that he's attacking them, then they start attacking each other. They start chanting orgy porgy, and it becomes so nice. Jay, I'm telling you, this is the way I feel when I'm on Twitter most of the times. When I'm in comment sections and I'm seeing people, I want to punch every commenter sometimes, but then I realize you can't spend any time even writing a reply. It's pointless. And when he realizes he is just surrounded by completely out of their mind pre-programmed animals that they're beating each other up, and oh my God, kill it, the Savage went on shouting. He started, what was that, Lenina that he attacked?
Yeah, he beats Lenina.
Jeez, man. Boy, so he really runs it out of himself at the end.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess it just shows that John the Savage kind of represents the problem for this society, because if the principles that he embodies are allowed to run free, then as Mustafa Mon says, this society goes nuts and will collapse. And so, you have this very dark dystopian ending where they inject him with Sona, or they gas him or whatever. So the helicopters took flight, stupefied by the Soma and exhausted by frenzy of sensuality. So he ends up participating in the orgy, and then when he wakes up out of his drug orgy experience, he has this tremendous amount of remorse and gives into despair, and decides to commit SUICIDE, which is ironically what he had told Mustafa Mon he wanted that freedom, he wanted that ability to decide his own fate, decide this and that, but I think that he represents the old world and the end of the old world.
Yes.
And that's why Huxley had to have him as a character die.
The suicide in the last couple of paragraphs, you knew it was coming, because what sense can really be made of this? And you're going to spend the rest of your natural life as in the middle of this waking nightmare. My question is, I understand there is a very creative and poetic reason for ending a book like this, when logically you can say, well, why didn't he go to the Caribbean with a bunch of other people who are reading books, and he could probably make friends over there, and he would probably have a lot better shot at some kind of normalcy and a new start somewhere on an island with good weather than sitting over there in a lighthouse in full view of this metropolis that is full of crazy genetically programmed goons. But like I said, it's a piece of literature that had to be wrapped up in one way or another, and hopelessness was the final conclusion. But I want to see what you think. Final thoughts on that, if you haven't already gotten them, and we'll go into what the audience is thinking then too.
I think that to me it speaks to it's not a novel that presents any happiness or hope, and to me that suggests, just like 1984 has a similarly dismal ending, that neither character really wanted to present any possible reaction against the New World Order. Perhaps Orwell did. I mean, some people make that argument, but I just don't know. But I know that the books don't leave me with any hope, and I think that's part of the, they might be mechanisms for conditioning people to think, oh well, there's just no hope. And when I read the other Huxley books, like there's Perennial Philosophy, there he calls for a new world religion where all the religions blend into one. You've got Doors of Perception, right, talking about LSD and all that, and then you've got the brothers who wrote, his brother Julian, who writes the Philosophy of UNESCO, promoting the term transhumanism. And then I did find that other Julian Huxley book that I've got that I read many years ago. It's one of the Global Elite books, and here it's called Living Through a Revolution. And the main point, the only reason this book is that relevant is that there's the first chapter is called On Living in a Revolution, and he's basically saying what we read in Brave New World, right? That we're undergoing a revolution that will lead us to a new world order. That's the end of the first chapter, is that this new world order will be one in which there is a single world state. Right. I mean, he literally says and uses the word new world order in the book, right?
Yep.
And that is a lesser known book by Julian Huxley, On Living Through a Revolution.
Is that a first edition?
I don't know. I just got it from a library sale years ago. I don't think it's worth anything. It's just
I just like the old binding. Yeah. That's right.
It is the first edition.
It is?
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, it's well loved.
Although I'm sure it's not. I don't think it's worth anything.
No, it's just cool to have something like that. I think I have a first edition Farewell to Arms by Hemingway, and it's not. It's in not good shape, but it's just great to have something that old. There's
that's true.
Different energy about it.
Printed in 1942.
The first comment I have over here is from KTJO. Says that ending, wow. I had so much hope for John after the debate about God in chapter 17. I thought we would see John start to crack the brainwashing of the civilized world. I was blinded by the civilized world cracking John in the end. Just such a depressing novel. And yeah, well, here's another little more. 26 Ahab says, what's the point of truth or beauty or knowledge? This is the quote. What's the point of truth or beauty or knowledge when the anthrax bombs are popping all around you? End quote. Now, where have I heard that recently?
Yeah.
Yes. Incredible. Here's another one. Philosopher. A philosopher is a man who dreams of fewer things than there are in heaven and earth. So there's just people just pointing out things that they love. Here's another one. Here's a quote from 26 Ahab again. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. But you don't do either, neither suffer nor oppose. You just abolish the slings and arrows. It's too easy, end quote. And that he equated that to men can become pregnant. Which I think, yeah, there's just so much here. But you see, the whole thing with the men become pregnant stuff, it is such a, that is a stepping stone. You know, you don't need any of that crap in the year 2500 in this book. You don't need any of that crap. You're talking about those are first or advanced phase, but still advanced first phase earlier compared to the year 2500. Those are things that you do to a society when you just want to sever their connection to reality in the first place, and then start introducing more transhumanist ideas. So yeah, I guess looking in the end result, this is small beans. The whole men can be women, men can be pregnant, but it was necessary for this, no doubt.
Yeah, it's a lot like 1984 too, where the words change meaning, and Winston's basically in there, updating and changing the words at a whim. The Ministry of Truth basically revises and contradicts itself all the time, and that's part of the psychological warfare, is to intentionally promote the contradictions.
NJSF says, for me, chapters 16 and 17 were the most interesting as John confronts Mustafa Mond. It may just be me, but inadvertently or not, Huxley showed the only chance of miserable survival outside of such a world, the reservation. Not fully free, ignorant, but the most free. Add to that keeping a modicum of knowledge, more isolation and captivity, capacity for defense. In these chapters, there are so many of the themes that we can identify with today's society and the elite's behavior come to light. Number one, the hidden message for the Pebbles' own benefit, of course. The hidden message, the controller is well aware and has read Shakespeare, the Bible, even intrigued, but oh, no, not for the masses. They cannot handle it, would be unhappy. It is a charity that he is doing for them, actually. Rules for thee, not for me. The society is ignorant. Ignorance is blissful, is fully realized in this. Here we have another quote. People are happy, they get what they want, and they never want what they can't get. Population control, not insofar as absolute numbers, but rather as a pyramid level ration. Both pure art and pure science are dangerous, so both have to be controlled and corrupted. Corruption of art by over-sexualization, over-violence, only the most primitive lizard brain emotions. Isn't that what Hollywood currently does? No doubt. Here's another quote from the book. But that's the price we have to pay for stability. You've got to choose between happiness and what people used to call high art. So that Jay, that's what you had brought up in the opening too. And then we talk about what sort of science, scientific training, so you can't judge. Now the real thing about science is, it was a scientific method. That was what we learned when we were in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade or whatever. That was the basis of what dictates science. There's no ideology that is baked into that. It is a method for testing certain ideas until you get a result that is repeatable. And even then, it doesn't become necessarily a fact. you have theories and whatever. And here what you're seeing is that through the controlling of art and science, which is why government should not be involved in funding either, you actually don't have art and science. It's just like having law with selective enforcement of law, and you don't have actually law in that respect. And that's another very indicative piece of modern American life too.
Absolutely, yeah. I got to get into some of the other Huxley texts that I haven't got to yet. Did you, by the chance, there's Aldous in Gaza is pretty wild. He talks about demons and that, but did you by chance get to watch the Berkeley lectures?
No, I did not.
Yeah, we got to watch those too. Those are really insightful.
I would love to. We can do that on the 7:00 show one night if you want. And just,
I sent the links too if you want to watch those.
I remember. I have them set aside, no doubt. We can do that because this has been so eye-opening, especially the background I've gotten on the Huxley family from you and from the conversations we had on these sessions. All right, well, we got room for a couple more. It's 9:23. We're doing well. In chapter 17, this is from Ankosan. It says, in chapter 17, as Mustafa Mon was speaking, it occurred to me that those who are created in these bottles may have been created as if they have no soul. Demonic as that is, in the last 2 days I've been listening to various presentations on death and the theme of separation of the soul from the body at the moment of death. All of this is pushing me to go back and delve into the subject again, because I think that may be heretical. I'm an Orthodox Christian. Other thing I realize at the end of this same chapter is that the savage, John, is the Christ archetype viewed through the eyes of the atheist Huxley. He is taking on the sins of the world. What do you think about that, Jay?
Oh yeah, great analogy. I didn't even realize that. In fact, I need to make a note of that. Yeah, that is what he's doing. That's why he's. I mean, it's silly to whip yourself, but that's what probably Huxley would think of Christianity as, right? Oh, I've got to punish myself like Christ or something like that. But
well, that first night,
great point.
That first night in the lighthouse, what did he do? I forget all the things that he put himself through, but he went through several phases of seeking forgiveness, asking, praying, calling out to God, and then holding his arms out into that crucifix position for as long as it took him to like cramp up and fall down, whatever.
Right.
And I think after that first night near the lighthouse, the text read something along the lines of he felt he was worthy of entering at that point. So what was the lighthouse? Was that going into limbo? I don't know, but it is a really interesting analogy that Ankosan brings up.
Well, there was earlier mentioning of the Thomas à Kempis book, Imitation of Christ, and so he's trying to imitate Christ, and that's an older sort of Roman Catholic manual, right? Mystical text where the idea is that you have to actually literally kind of reenact things that Christ went through, right? So if you're not being whipped and beaten and all that was the idea that like the medieval flagellants in the Latin West. So there's this sort of desire on the part. I don't think that it's actually what we were supposed to do in Christianity, but to the commenter's point, that's the kind of thing that Huxley, being basically an atheist, that's what he probably thinks of Christianity as. So that's why he's making John the Savage like Thomas à Kempis's Imitation of Christ.
So then that would explain a little bit more. NJSF has commented underneath this here too, and said, I like your thought of the imagery of John as the Christ archetype, but I missed the message of salvation. There is none. In that respect, it is truly satanic, as in Christ being defeated. So,
exactly.
but to your point, Jay, this could have just been an atheist's projection as he was putting his book together, Huxley himself.
No, I think it means both. It's that and Christ defeated.
Christ will, okay. Ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, you remember earlier, right? We have Mustafa Mon pictured as an inverted Antichrist type of figure.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when he's like, let the children come unto me at the end of chapter 2 or 3? Right?
Yep.
And so we have this attempt of the Christ-like character is John, and John ends up dead and defeated. The Antichrist figure, Mustafa Mond, continues on and is the controller of the world. So Mustafa Mond is basically Antichrist having victory over the Christ-like character, John the Savage.
Ali Q pointed out the end of chapter 17 when John was claiming the right to be unhappy and to be unhappy about test scores and get rid of all that stuff. Said this book alerts us to the sorry state that we are in. We need to be unhappy, otherwise we never truly understand what happiness is. And not only that, Ali, I would say that another thing that came up before and that I brought up with Jay not too long ago was that whole idea of nobility and heroism. To be in a place where you are called into action for a noble pursuit, to be a hero to someone who needs it. It doesn't have to be a gigantic, it doesn't take much to be a hero to somebody, and you don't have to go fight off a gang of attackers to be a hero either. It's very, it's easy to be heroic, and that is something that we only, again, have an opportunity to do and to seize the moment when we are allowed to have life play out ahead of us and not have it to be so controlled down to every molecule that makes up a person, which is what they find themselves living in this book. So,
absolutely, yeah. I think that it's dismal. It's probably itself a version of psychological warfare, but it is important to read it so that we know the kinds of thought processes that the elite have, and we can see, I think, a lot of the weaknesses there because this dystopia is going to collapse. It's not going to work. It's anti-human. It's unnatural, and I think that you see throughout history the desire to create a world state all the way back to the Tower of Babel, and it always fails. So.
This will be the last one. Casey Kakalaki. There's a couple of other really great comments here that we're not going to have time to get to, but and really I looked back at the other threads, and you guys and gals have been commenting and talking with each other and working things, and I love it. So that's why we set this up on the forum. So go ahead and if you're listening to this even months down the road when this whole series is going to be made public, then it's just as relevant to you in 2027, if you're listening to this, as it is right now in 23. Go and jump into those threads and read what has been written and add some of your own. Casey says the following. Some thoughts and questions. I read the whole book the first day I picked it up, and it was and as the weeks went on in this book club, I became really glad that I only had to review. I don't know what I could have forced myself, if I could have forced myself to keep going back to that world week after week. It burned and it stung, and it knocked the wind out of me while I was reading it, so I figured I'd just swallow all the poison at once. The one thing about the last leg of the journey that seriously puzzled me, why did John take the handout and agreeing to live in that lighthouse? Why'd you have to do that, John? I was expecting and hoping that he would either go back to the reservation or back to the wilderness of North America. But see, Casey and I were thinking the same way. When I realized that he was but a stone's throw away from London, I knew that they'd never leave him alone. The thing about getting psychopaths out of your life is that you have to go zero contact and make yourself uncontactable. As an aside, as Huxley subtly throwing shade at Native Americans when he wrote, or was he throwing shade at Native Americans when he wrote that the savage accepted the free government housing which led to his demise? Such as a little detail that stuck out to me. Yeah, Jay, you had brought that up. Yeah. And
the reservation is an older model of great society welfare control, and it puts you under control. And so, as for the motivations, I think John probably was overly confident in his own abilities. He probably thought he could be a force for good and that maybe he could change things. He could be a revolutionary force. And I think that was his mistake, was to not understand the reality of how bad things had become. So that would be my guess as to why he felt the need to try to remain on the outskirts of this dystopia and to try to change it. And that's actually what leads to his demise.
She continues and says, as an aside, I had a very hard time picturing the scenes from the final chapter. Did he succumb to the orgy-porgy ritual before hanging himself? Yes, but that's because he got sprayed down by the Soma cloud. is that why he did it? Because he committed the ultimate sin against himself, or because he realized he'd never escape, that there was nowhere to escape? Definitely a lot of the no escape aspect. Yeah, I'm sure that he had just gone through all that cleansing rituals at the lighthouse prior to being discovered, to try to seek forgiveness for the world that he found himself in for however long, and then of course to get gassed and have gone through seemingly unconsciously on autopilot a drug-induced orgy. Yeah, I guess it all must have just been like I can't take it anymore. So
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, she ends, she says, to be honest, the description of how they found him confused me all the way. I had to ask my mom what she thought it meant, and she said she had to look it up. That's how I found out he supposedly hanged him. So yeah, he was just swinging from east to west to southeast. That's just really it. Thank you, Frank and Jay, for taking this walk with us. I love you all, but I'm glad it's over. It's been real, it's been fun, but it ain't been real fun. Thanks again, guys. Casey. So.
Absolutely. Are you thinking of doing another lit book? What's your next book?
The next book I was going to do, I maybe in June. I wanted to do de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, just because it's around the time of all the patriotic holidays, and I never actually read it. But after that, I don't know. I think after that, I didn't have anything planned until maybe October. And I wanted to read Mario Puzo's The Godfather.
That'd be cool.
If you want to jump in on that, because I know that you watch the movies, and I wanted to see how much.
Yeah, I'm a big Godfather fan, and I put it in my books and all that, and I've done a lot of history of organized crime and the mafia podcasts. So I just did a whole 3-hour Gladio, CIA and Vatican and mafia podcast. So I'd love to do that one. It'd be great.
Have you ever read it, the original?
I have not read the novel.
Awesome, because me neither. So I'm going into I overdose on the movies, and I've read books about the making of the movies and all that stuff. So it's going to be great to actually get the source material. And Puzo wrote the screenplay with Coppola. So yeah, I will. I'll let you know when we start. That's going to be a fall time read, and I cannot wait to do it. So we'll do that together.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right, man. Well, anything you want to leave everybody? Where are you going to be the next couple of days? And this was a wonderful ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just did. We've been churning out podcasts all week. We did multiple. I did an analysis of John Wick. I did a couple podcasts on Alien, PSYOP, Deception. We did a podcast making fun of Ben Affleck movies, but actually what we're doing in that podcast is going through and dissecting all the propaganda in Ben Affleck movies. So we went through Pearl Harbor, Argo, The Accountant, Dogma, which actually, believe it or not, have quite a bit of propaganda, especially Argo, which is about the CIA operation in the Iranian Revolution. So I did a whole podcast on Vatican, mafia, intelligence agencies, which was the Paul Williams Gladio book, and then we covered Committee of 300, the John Coleman book, yesterday. So we've been splitting them out, and then I've got some live events, which you go to my community tab or to my Twitter, you'll see the live event. I'll be doing an online salon lecture on the Tavistock Institute. We have a live event June 3rd and 4th in Nashville, Tennessee. Big, huge event with a bunch of speakers, Owen Schroyer, all those kinds of people. So go to my Twitter and get tickets for all that.
Damn. Well, Jay, thanks for everything, man. This has been a wonderful endeavor, and we will do it again, I'm sure. Now,
thanks for including me. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
No doubt. We will, and we'll talk about Godfather 3 in particular at some point, because it ended up being the weakest link in the trilogy. But there is a really awesome, especially the whole concept of the Immobiliare and the Vatican, John Paul I, the assassination of a pope. It's great stuff. So we'll talk about that at some point. I'm sure it'll pop up in November or October. Thanks again, man. I'll talk soon.
Yes. All right. See ya.
Later. Ladies and gents, that's going to be good. Now, let me also just say, yes, Christiane Hall said she wants to do Democracy in America with me, so we'll do that in a couple of months. It's April, May, so maybe we'll start in mid-May or something. The Godfather, you got to be you have to understand something though. I don't want anybody complaining about how graphic and sexual it is. It's a pulp fiction novel. Well, it's a novel by a pulp fiction novelist. You got to okay. So this is going to be it's going to be exciting. It's going to be very exciting. But I know enough about the book to just impart onto you that it's going to be a lot different than the things that we have read so far. I think it's going to be great. But you've all been wonderful. Email me any of your thoughts. Get into that thread and enjoy yourselves and talk to other people. And you've been good. I'm looking at everybody in the chat room right now. Dwayne, Nancy, Jerry, AQ, NJSF, Bright Wheel, Lark. It's been great. Yes. All right, guys. Have a good one.